So on the graph, we have IIU, CFS A, and on top we have Mara B. Okay, my name is Saron, I'm from Taylor's, and on my left is Vinky. On my right, we have Umar from IIU, and they're both trainees with me today. The motion that you guys have picked is the one about regretting, be regretting. You said it? Yeah, regret, shaming, cultural appropriation. Okay, great. Looking forward to it. I'll be the timer as well. I'll at 1, twice at 7. Please cross time because I'm making mistake. Alright. Okay, so very happy to start. Let's have the Prime Minister.
Chair, in a world where people are being discriminated, oppressed, constantly criticized for what they wear because of what they believe, because the things that they are obligated to actually wear and celebrate, we say it's important for us to regret the shaming and condemnation that's happening who are practicing this particular culture. So we say it's okay for people, majorities, to practice what minority culture are trying to preach. We say it's fine with them. Why? Under our side, we're going to prove that it's going to help minorities better. And secondly, we're going to prove how it's going to create a more harmonious society by actually allowing this cultural appropriation, actually celebrating the cultures that are present in the minority culture. So what am I going to do today? Let's talk about cultural appropriation. We say it happens when a particular individual of not a certain race, a certain religion, practices a different culture of another culture. Right? The way they dress, the way they celebrate, what is up. And then we say that why is it so important? Because it's going to create a more accepting person. Because it practices and celebrates, and this is helpful because of the sensitivity that's going on today. The issue is, Mr. Speaker, it's not how you are oppressed because of what you believe. It's not how you are oppressed on what you do. It's how people respond to what you do. We say when a person wears the hijab, it's important that you are not going to be labeled as a particular Muslim who is oppressed and obligated towards that. When another white person wears the hijab, we say it's important because people will say, oh, it's also a choice for that particular person because she's not obligated to actually wear the hijab in the first place. So the issue today is that in the status quo, there are bad perceptions about certain particular cultures or what they practice. We say it's harmful because in a race and religious sensitivity kind of era, it's important for us to celebrate the cultural appropriation that's happening. Because as you can see, when you wear a certain thing, you are seen as just a particular race or culture. You are not seen as an equal human being. That's what we're going to fight for together. So we can see that how bad status quo is, that people focus too much on regretting and shaming towards the people who are not of that culture, practicing that culture. They forget about what the main issue is about. They forget to actually trigger the discussion of what's happening. For example, when Siti Hadid posts for a magazine, when she's trying to actually objectify and symbolize the idea of her being a Palestinian descendant, people keep on focusing regretting and shaming her for wearing the hijab just because she's not a Muslim. People focus on shaming her other than actually talking about the issue she is trying to promote. This is why it's so important for us to celebrate the cultural appropriation today. So we're always going to say that why is condemning and shaming these people are so important? They think they're actually defending the actual originality of that culture. But what we say is so harmful because under their side, they're only going to create exclusivity that will hence only create a block between creating a proper discussion and actually going to actually put that's only going to put a block between people who are going to fight for the equal rights for people such as Muslims and also Indians trying to be seen as a normal human being. Yes.
I think that represents the heart and also a walk, right? As big as a normal trumpet that is annoying the leaders in constitution. I can find with that is spreading around saying that African people are just annoying their own leaders.
You see, this is why the main reason we're having a debate together. It's because the reason why wars happen is because people are able to accept the kind of differences that actually happen. So once we celebrate the cultural appropriation that happens, once other people also practices a certain culture, it becomes a more accepting kind of practice. People are actually willing to see it as a norm in society. People are not seeing it as only an exclusive thing that's happening within the black culture, within the Muslim culture. This is why it's so important in society, which is more accepting towards the differences that people have their obligations or because of their teachers. So we say under our good for the minorities, and it's also going to create a better kind of society that actually helps the minorities. The issue today is that so many people actually discriminate and oppress people because of certain things that they wear on the physical side, also what they practice, right? The little issues, such as microaggressions that happens towards Muslims, the microaggressions that happens for black people just because they practice certain things, we see that these little things will actually lead up to major kind of wars and actually major grow into aggressive kind of oppressions towards these particular minorities, which is so harmful because we want to fight for equality, we want to make sure they are also seen as equal human beings. So first, let's talk about why people practice culture, right? When a person or a Muslim practices a certain culture, such as wearing a hijab, sometimes it's an obligation, and it's also what they have to wear because of what they have to do, right? So even whatever the society perceives, or when they do, they still have to do it. So this is why it's so important for other people to also embrace the culture. Because we say, sometimes the society think that these women are oppressed because they have to put a piece of cloth on their head. We say that therefore, this shows, therefore, when we celebrate cultural appropriation, once a white person or a non-Muslim wears the hijab, this shows that this person who's not obligated to actually wear the hijab is also wearing the hijab because she wants to, because she actually chooses to put that piece of cloth on her head. This proves to society that practicing a particular culture is not just a form of oppression, it's not just an obligation, it can also become a choice. This creates a more open-minded society to become more accepting towards the cultures and things that they practice. So we think that it's important for us to be more accepting of Muslim cultures. The fact is that when an individual practices these certain things, people will be more open-minded and accepting of the particular culture. For example, if an Islamophobe sees his sister wearing a hijab, then discussions will happen. We'll eventually ask why they actually wear a hijab, what's the importance of hijab. So we think that it's important for them to actually celebrate this. And then secondly, we talk about how it's going to trigger more productive discourse, right? Like yes, it's gonna say the quality of the discourse of the culture is so important. What we keep saying is they're going to only focus on exclusivity, they're going to keep these people in an equal chamber, making the other people, the majority, forget to actually decide and actually know what the actual reason behind these cultures are. But on the outside, we say white party is so better because we need them to actually bring the message that Islam is not just a form of oppression. We need them to see that what a person wears is not just an oppression because of that. We want this culture to actually become a norm, and at least there's discussion on our side with a mass amount of people. The numbers better because in order to actually stop oppression that happens with people, in order to stop the little issues or microaggressions which will lead to other wars, we say it's important because we need the other people to open up their mind to create a better society in a more harmonious condition. And for all those reasons, proud to propose.
Okay, now we start the opposition case. Let's invite the leader of the opposition. Alright guys, we ready to spot and grab before and after. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems like the government doesn't understand the fact of how cultural appropriation actually happens, right? If you are from that minority and you are acted and represented, right? But secondly, they also never considered, this is an important thing, right? They never considered until this on their side the harms of what happens when a society does cultural appropriation towards the minorities. We're hoping that second speaker will come up and try to talk to you about these harms, why these harms are non-existent under their sense, right? Let's talk to you on Prime Minister's speech first of all. She talked to you on how when there's cultural appropriation system within society, what happens that people will now celebrate that culture even more, right? We think that this is a false accusation made under their sense. Why is it? Because when you celebrate a specific culture and in terms of by having cultural appropriation, right? This isn't really that celebration isn't really what happens. Because you have to understand how people react to society, right? So if I'm celebrating a culture and doing it by cultural appropriation, by wearing a specific item of that specific minority, right? That doesn't really mean that I will now be more understanding of that specific culture, right? Especially when you have the trend of fashion, of it being a fashion statement, or of it being a fashion wear, and we don't think that this will like get people the importance of these specific items to that specific culture, right? Especially when everyone is now doing it, right? But secondly, they talk to you on how now people would deem that these practices of that specific culture is seen as a norm in society, right? We think that that when you have cultural appropriation and it's deemed as a norm of society, that's the exact norm, right? Because now you have individuals who use things from a specific minority, right? And they will now use these things as a norm within their own lifestyle, right? So meaning that now lifestyle, understanding that this certain headpiece or this certain neck piece is now something that we will usually wear within throughout our life, right? Without understanding the meaning behind this specific item, right? But so like the rest of my introduction will be integrated within my speech, right? So let's talk to you on the side of the actual problem existing within status quo, right? A problem that they never wanted to conceive, right? We think that cultural appropriation is the act of utilizing culture or representing culture in a way that misconstrues meaning or that misconstrues meaning of specific items in this culture, where these items are used as specific knowledge, right? And this diminishes the value of that particular item, right? What are we okay with in these particular circumstances, right? We're okay with the active acknowledgement of the use of these specific items as part of that culture, right? Meaning that we're okay with the fact that people understand what this specific item within that culture is useful and the meaning that it has towards these specific minorities, right? But towards these specific minorities, right? What's the comparison of their side and the outside where you have a world without this naming and shaming, right? We think that when you have a world without naming and shaming, you have a world where people are unaware of the importance and the value of specific items to that specific culture, right? You also have so you don't understand that these specific items belong to that particular culture, and these are people who are often the minority, right? So these are people. So this, for example, the Sioux tribe in America, right? Where like day by day, they use this cultural importance because of the fact of how members of society downplays the specific or the importance of that item towards the culture, right? This can be especially seen when the Washington football team name their own team as the Redskins, right? And they use the Apache leader's face as the logo of their team, right? We can see that this is like the important image that these Sioux tribes have within America, and this is the image of their leaders. And now these people are seen, especially like when the team loses, right? These people are seen as jokes, and the mascot itself, or the logo that they have, is now seen as a whole joke, right? So we think that's just especially detrimental, especially when you're trying to want to link back the image of that specific team towards the image of that specific minority group, right? So yeah. So what is the world that we want to live? We want to talk about, right? We want this world. We want to live in a world which is like much like status quo, right? Where like people are continuously naming and shaming, and it's becoming a trend. We think that this is especially better because you create awareness in society of what cultural appropriation is, but you also create awareness in society of the importance of these cultural values or these cultural items towards a specific minority, right? So let's talk to you about this. Let's talk about the discussion about agency and respecting minorities' culture, right? Go for that, yeah.
So would you say this respect for this culture is to prevent the practical harms like oppression that they face?
Yeah, sure, I can see that, right? Because we think that when you have naming and shaming, you're also protecting the values that these things have towards that minority group. You're also protecting the minority group as a whole, right? So let's go back to this and talk to you about this discussion about agency and how respect only means that only means that have value and that allows this minority group to survive in status quo, right? The moment that people take away this specific value, and use it as an novelty or as a joke, this is the moment that people don't
serious, or don't take these minorities seriously in society, but also don't also deem them as a joke, right? What are the reasons? What are the reasons that this is important, right? We think that cultural appropriation takes away the values that it has towards these specific minority groups, but it also makes society think differently of the image of that specific culture, right? Any discourse that happens in society, even if there is a discourse that these minority groups do not represent themselves in, right? Because the discourse only happens when people use that specific item or like use that specific item to cater to their own needs, right? We think that in these specific situations, these minority groups don't get the chance to control the discourse that happens in that specific part of society. They also harms their own lifestyle because their own lifestyle is deemed especially detrimental in the way that these people perceive these specific individuals within society, right? Right? We think that this economic is important them because now these white people are able to use the items as a way to twist the ways on how people perceive these specific individuals and perceive the items that these individuals use in their daily lives. Right? We don't think that these specific uses are especially important towards these minorities in any other culture.
All right, thank you. We move on to deputy prime minister.
Yes, we can see to the fact that to misrepresentation or the intentions of the people practicing a certain culture is harmful, but the issue isn't necessarily about disrespecting, but I think the implications of what you get from disrespecting this, and we'll tell you on the outside how we can actually prevent these harms from happening on the outside, right? So what exactly is the issue? I'll clarify one more time. Like my POI just now, exactly why a POI is because obviously you want people to respect your culture, and the reason why is to prevent this oppression you get when people don't respect. The idea of you practicing a certain culture and you getting discriminated from it is the actual issue, and the practical harms that a certain minority goes through because they practice their culture is the issue. And we think that it stems from disrespecting the culture. We'll tell you on the outside how even if you have the extent of people practicing the culture without considering the actual reason of practicing it, why it can actually create more change compared to the outside, right? So firstly, a few rebuttals. Firstly, regarding how on the outside, the discourse that happens is going to be because it's trendy, because it's fashionable, and usually not because of the correct intentions, which is because it's part of the community, right? So first, you have to understand that on the outside, why it's more likely for people to actually get into this culture and understand is because of this celebration. The more you make it normalized, the more you use it, shows that you are celebrating the culture and you practicing it through celebration. But even if the discourse that comes across is because, hey, I want to because it's trendy, not because I'm Muslim, we think that it's way more important to get that kind of discourse compared to their side. Because under their side, what you get is this exclusivity, which I'll tell you the harms later. Under their side, you won't get the same understanding that you get under our side, right? And under their side, what's going to happen is that the minorities will become a this. Secondly, regarding offending these minorities, I'll tell you later on. Why number one, you're not going to offend this minority because firstly, you practicing it shows that you are in a way dignifying the culture because you have the interest in actually using it in your daily life. But even if it offends minority, people tell you why it's more important to offend these people than get them oppressed in the future, right? So my first argument regarding exclusivity of this culture and why is it harmful. So what cultural appropriation does, right, under their side, under our side, what it does is that it ensures that you practice it no matter what. You might be the right person that was a bindi, you know what I mean? And so we think that this actually allows everyone to practice whatever culture they're interested in. So what happens right now is that there's going to be this no segregation. Under their side, they'll have this exclusivity that religion has. So why is this exclusivity harmful? Right? Firstly, because it becomes weird. It doesn't become a norm. The fact that it's not practiced and it's only practiced by a certain group of minorities shows that it's going to be super rare. And the idea that it becomes super rare, it will be you will look so out of place and segregated from society. And at that point, it's when someone can go, you're wearing a bindi, let's go. And we tell you that the reason why cultural appropriation has this is because their practices are usually tangible, like you wear hijab, you wear bindi, it's not more about practices. So people's responses are usually, when they see it, they respond. So when they see you wearing a hijab and you're the only one and no white person's wearing it, it becomes a lot weird. On the outside, it becomes sort of like a norm, because when you see white people wearing it, and you see white people wearing it, you see Muslims wearing it. And the point it becomes a norm is when you actually enable these people to become more understanding of the culture, and because sometimes the idea of being oppressed because of what you wear, it doesn't come across. So at the point at which you allow these white people to wear hijabs or wear bindis to feel the kind of oppression you get, that point is when the understanding is going to happen under our side, which you don't get under their side because of this exclusivity, right? Yes.
Maori and also Japanese people can also popularize Hakka or their own culture and make it the norm. Why must you depend on the majority that will distract and also not show it?
Because the people that are oppressing these minorities are the majority. So we need the understanding from these majorities. You can't have minorities representing minorities. How are you going to get the change? Because right now, because it's such a social issue, the people that think that the best person to change are the majority itself. That's why we're opening this door for them to understand a reason to respect your culture in the first place. And then the other side, when you act like such a boss-ass person and say, you're not allowed to enter my culture, you're not allowed to wear hijab, you're basically closing the door and say, you know what, I don't need your understanding and I can survive on my own, which is not the case because you are being bullied by the majority right now, right? So it's not, you know what I mean? So why we don't want the segregation is because why we don't want the segregation is because at the end of the day, it's going to, for example, employment, when you see that people get to judge you because of your looks, because of what you wear, because it's not a norm, and you'll get it, and it allows room for discrimination. It's what we don't want. And then the other side, the only thing they're trying to solve is the respect. Okay, then respect, then why? A lot of these things will still happen because a lot of people that think it's weird are still going to discriminate against it. And we think that's a burden we put on side opposition, right? So we think that this is super important because the minorities have the right to be able to be looked on as a human being and not because, oh, you're Muslim. That's it. We want people to look in more depth, and we think that the way is to normalize these things and to ensure that people don't see it as something that is important.
All right, and to continue this debate, let's have the deputy lead of the session.
I think it's a bit like the comparison between a world in which there was no criticism or no one to constructively talk about where cultural appropriation starts and where it ends. And this world is necessarily one that doesn't have it. Because what they wanted to claim from the start was that we're able to talk about what exactly cultural appropriation was by celebrating it, which is kind of weird because only celebrating a particular act means you're not able to say whether it is right or wrong, but instead absolutely condone it as an ability for example, white people to have complete control over whether or not the Washington Redskins was something they were able to use as a logo for a AG. And that essentially was the lacking thing that came from Southern government, that they didn't operationalize how discussion and discourse would operate in a way in which would be in a very positive light for people to say, well, we think that economic empowerment is important for people who are from rate-limited societies or from minorities per se, and this is why we should continue with that discussion forward. What it actually about is criticism about whether or not as an agency between minorities being able to say this is my own culture compared to another person. But the second thing which is important is to realize how the only means in which they want to justify why it is okay for you to appropriate another person's culture is that we give you money and we allow people to wear what they necessarily need, and that kind of means more understanding when you see a lot of people walking around with flower crowns and party hats at Coachella, which ironically happens this week, and say, I understand how these people operate, and I understand they're minorities, and I want to respect them. This nuance was largely lacking. Because if you can't tell us that when a person who is white, for example, wears an Apache hat and says, I am representing a minority, instead of saying, I think I would cool with it, the discussion doesn't move forward from that. So what do we have on our side? I have two issues to actually talk about. Firstly, why culture has a larger value in the world after we shame cultural appropriation or denigrate it. And secondly, why the discussion of agency is very important and why we should grant abilities for minorities to say this particular culture is mine. Something that we don't think they'll necessarily get with the reports. So I'll talk about the first thing and why it increases and gives what appropriation is. I think it's important to how people treat and how people value something is based on how aware nuances behind a particular item or how important it is to different people within society. Acknowledging this, that means that appreciation varies in a world in which there are different cultures and they have different meanings to you. A good example of this is I'm Malay and a lot of other Malay values relate closer to me better than how an Indian person, for example, may relate to those values and vice versa. Or, for example, I may not relate better to Singaporean values as much as Malaysian values. And this necessarily can be the same thing why people don't appreciate what minorities necessarily have in status quo. But the fact that it varies means that there are different nuances and how we treat them are then different. So they want to claim, but we have celebration and we can say that, I understand that cultures are very much intrinsic. But the problem is you have to show us why a person is likely to even enter this discussion and say, I can appreciate it for what this culture necessarily is after the buying of that particular item in that scenario. So why then at this point we told you it was important for us to condemn it for two reasons. Firstly, because we told you that it created a sort of pressure to say that this particular item shouldn't be used for you to look cooler or to look fashionable, for example, without understanding the cultural value behind it. Because the only reason why you pay a lot of money, for example, for a particular item that doesn't look like it's much, for example, is because we understand we want to support the very fact that it comes from a culture that values that particular item as much. But secondly, that understanding this and paying extra money, for example, for the cultural value behind a particular item means that we understand that specific culture is something worth talking about. But what else do we tell you it does? This is a unique extension that comes from us. That firstly, it gives a unique ability for you to highlight the nuance of that culture first in this particular scenario and allows individuals to benefit from the thing that they have the closest proximity to. So for example, when a Indian shop owner, for example, wants to sell Apache hats compared to Walmart, the problem with that is that when you sell the same item, Walmart probably has more volume, for example, be able to sell more than you. The problem about this is where there's competition, for example, with other competitors which probably have more power than you. But secondly, that it gives the most amount of control to these individuals to say how this particular item should then be represented. Because on the other side of the house, we'll have people at Walmart, for example, wanting to make Apache hats look more appealing and wanting to sell them, and selling them at a rate in which you change how that particular item might look like. Realize here that big Indians can't change how it looks like because they're minorities, but Walmart can because of the volume that have. This, as a principal argumentation, is very important to understand that without practice, is still a value that society as a large and society as a conglomerate wants to uphold. But the very fact that we believe economic means doesn't mean that it's more important than cultural means. We don't need the money that you provide in your side of the house because people integrate well with cultures and civilizations anyway. But also, we don't want to assume that money is the only means in which these people can enrich themselves. Acknowledge that culture makes you different from the rest. So the second issue we want to talk about is the discussion of agency and what's important. Here's the way in which government operates in this kind of things, right? That firstly, we kind of got consent from individuals who use their culture at the end of the day. But without condemning this particular culture, you can't have people saying, I'm okay with it. For example, the reason why the director of Ghost in the Shell, who is Japanese by the way, said I was okay with Scarlett Johansson playing this role was because there's a huge discussion that happened in a particular scenario of him giving explicit consent. You don't have this, and you assume white people can simply just play that role because, well, they never say anything about it and no one wanted to condemn it. And that's problematic. The second thing is that the reason why a lot of people don't want to speak up in this particular scenario is that most of the people who want to commit cultural appropriation are individuals who are part of the majority. So when white people do this, Japanese people, for example, felt as if they couldn't speak up as a minority compared to the larger majority that has a high power dynamic in that particular scenario. Or, and even worse, they're willing to say, I'm kind of represented in a way because at least Ghost in the Shell as a concept got out as a movie, but giving so little as a benefit still doesn't mean that you can give them the most and make sure that the efficacy of giving representation is the most. So what is the outcome of this? That firstly also creates pressures, for example, for Scarlett Johansson to not play that role and at least make sure that an Asian person plays a role in Mulan, for example. And why is this important? Because making and saying that Scarlett Johansson plays in a movie is better than a person with a particular minority playing in a movie means that you don't think these individuals can represent the culture the most. And if you think that that is the easiest way for you to justify that money is bigger than culture, then it already means you don't respect that culture. That's a huge problem.
All right. Now we move on to the government bit. Sorry. The appropriate term is needed and really give sorry. If we answer.
So, opposition is fighting for economic term, fighting for money term, or things about this kind of unfair representation. Right? But the thing about government is that we actually want to protect the people who are under pressure. Now, the urgency of our case is more important. We believe that what we want to fight is for them to actually solve what's actually currently happening, what's actually very, very detrimental to the society. We don't believe that the issue that they brought up is actually we don't believe it's as urgent as ours, and we believe that it's ours that is very necessary for us to actually help make change and societal change to the current situation. Alright, to go on about what they brought up, so let's talk about what the Prime Minister, the opposition leader of the So he brought up how it will actually give cultural representation, and we believe that this is actually not the case, because they say that first of all, they will not actually create any understanding. We tell you that it will, because because we know that the shaming is already happening, and it does create spark, it does create interest. So what happens when a non-cultural person wears a different culture? It actually triggers a reaction where it creates attention and creates an audience, and it actually opens a discussion, and we believe that it will actually evolve to a point where we will be able to give perception and we will be able to actually lead to this form of acceptance and familiarity of the culture, right? And actually you will be able to slowly start to look it up and start to understand. Before this, people never even bothered about Islam or anything, but after the attention has brought it to them because of the unfortunate terrorism, it's actually got people to first of truth. First, people did discriminate and this was a problem, but eventually people start to open up and they start to understand it is a long-term change, but it is actually a society that we need to do, that we need to strive and push. Alright, so then we brought up about how it actually how this will diminish the problem. And we know that it's not that it will not diminish the culture, we know it does not diminish the culture, but actually dignifies, because it actually gives them a platform that they never had before. Because this minority people already had their own they have their culture being represented by people who have a louder voice and a high platform. And we believe that it's actually necessary for them to actually give. Because before this, they never had a platform and they were always seen as different simply because of the things that they represented. But once the other people are, we have these more privileged people using their culture and showing that introducing it to society will actually create a form of dignification, because they will actually start to realize that these things exist. Because before this, people never even knew about the red skins, but because of these big names taking them out, it actually gives a boost of image. And just like you say, if they use it can be a joke, they can also be a thing to glorify if they actually win. So before this, they actually never even knew about them, but because of the platform that they were given, it actually gives a new form of recognition. And these people do automatically get a claim of their culture. Because when you see, they are aware that red skin does belong to the specific culture, and that was actually adapted. So we tell you that how actually that this will actually bring a yes.
Should we assume that because we can sell their culture better than them, that we should do so without their consent?
Thank you. Or the true reality that you cannot actually get the kind of consent that they are hoping for. That's the real reality right now. But so rather than actually, what we see is that because it actually gives the benefits of the platform, it actually gives them the understanding, right? So I will go on about how they talk about economic empowerment and youth. I can tell you that in order for these minorities, small ethnic to actually get economic empowerment, they require recognition. They require to be known, and this can be done under our policy. And in fact, and they actually will bring to how let's just take Lindsay Lohan for example, how she because of her wearing a hijab, it actually elevated and made people discuss about the problems of what's going on in that current situation, which we never had before. So we talk about how this creates pressure, and they will use it to look cooler. I believe that this is hardly an issue because if that thing is used to be cooler, it's used to be highlighted, so you think that's actually what we need, because they will actually give more of a boost to the minority. And so the thing of how let's talk about how they brought up the issue about putting a non-Asian character as Mulan. We believe that there's a difference between whitewashing and cultural appropriation. Because Mulan is an explicit example that people know that they represent that she is an Indian fighting for China, and that is why we believe that is a form of whitewashing that people should condemn and people should shame. What we are talking about is cultural appropriation. When we should allow and embrace people to have change of culture, to have change of bringing each other's culture to a different form of platform, so that both can actually benefit from it. True that the majority might give more benefit than the minority, but it will both elevate their benefits even though it's in a different scale. We believe that is necessary for the current fiscal. When people are constantly just being labeled as their race and are constantly having a tough life simply because of their culture. So we believe that is necessary for the societal change that we bring up. We believe that the economic empowerment that they talk about is not something that is as detrimental as the current oppression and discrimination that we're going through. We tell them that what we bringing is actually something far more detrimental issues. So with that, government side wants to help these minorities elevate them. majority might have an economic benefit over them, but it will actually give them recognition that they require, and that will actually elevate both sides, even though it's in a different scale, which is really needed for these minorities who have been in the unfortunate side for the longest time and will not actually be able to elevate themselves unless they actually start societal change. And with that,
Alright, let's have the last substantive speech.
The meaning of the haka will be so much different in the World Cup if England was the one that actually represent and win it in the first place. Just because you're the majority does not mean that you can hijack those narratives, control the discussion, and make sure that you can make those identity of people as a joke or offend them and say, oh, this is how you are supposed to be perceived and look like in the first place. We don't think there's a healthy environment for anyone of those people to be living in the first place. I'll debunk the idea that just because you're recognized, just because it's seen as a normal part of society, does not mean that you'll be less antagonized in the first place. And I'll go further down the line for what kind of discourse is going to happen in current situation. First off, let's talk about the normalization and recognition that we want to talk in the first place. Realize that part of the speech really about, oh, the white women wearing the hijab represent these people. First off, a white woman can also be a Muslim in the first place. Means that the current situation of white women in America wear hijab means that they still get discriminated, means that they can still be discriminated in the first place. Let's look at another example. Look at the jazz music genre or even the rock and rap and hip hop music genre. Very famous, part of the black culture. But what do you see of the black community in America? They're still being discriminated. They still think of being part of the ghetto and they are still being seen as part of that criminal group at the end of the day. Means that the negative perception of those culture can still exist even if you see that as part of the so-called these people are famous entertainment value occupation statement in the first place. But why is that particularly important? Realize under their side, the acceptance that they never want to engage to the extreme idea of people who are already bigoted or have a certain perception to not change in the first place. They want certain people that might later down the line. But acceptance can occur under their side because their misrepresentation continuously exists and there's never form of change that can happen. Even the directive rights, you can see that, oh, misrepresentation can already will exist under our side of that happens. Yes, there is a harm. Now you need to tell me and do a comparative of why that harm is why your benefit is particularly more important than harm. Moving to seeing that, oh, somehow people will just get better. Life doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Because like it or not, when people don't internalize this kind of situation, it creates a kind of discussion of wrong discussion that already happens in society. Why? Under their side, those who hold the mic and those who say all of this situation are people who never internalize the value. People who wear hijab as a fashion statement. Most likely they're not. The representation of hijab under their side and what they say is not more you want to protect your purity as what Islam wanted to tell you. But because this is an extravagant or this is a fashion statement, this is supposed to be how you want to attract men when you are wearing the hijab. And that's totally contradictory to what people want to say. These are the narrative where those are things are just entertainment. Those are things just fashion statement. Go beyond the board where then after that people don't particularly care or have different treatment towards these people. Because at the end of the day, those who are the biggest contributor towards this kind of discussion are still people who are very sick, do not internalize, and will never represent those culture in its essence form. Especially harmful when we already from either opposition that this happens when you actually propagate, you take the agency away from people who should be in part of the discussion. People who want to stand up for their rights, people who actually want to represent themselves, wanted to see that these are people who are mistreating us, who are all actually attacking our cultural identity, who say that we are living in the wrong way or we are living as a joke, who are trying to change how we're supposed to live in the first place, cannot be in a part of the discussion because they don't see as someone who are representing their own culture at the end of the day. That is particularly harmful because you will never change the kind of perception or idea that happens at the end what happens with these people right there and then. Here is how you want to change the kind of situation that's going to happen in status quo. This is where I'll tackle the DPM idea, right? Only and tackle about exclusive value. Because I'm asking you, the fact that the Maori people can actually make haka famous, and through the New Zealand can make Maori tribe famous during the haka, the World Cup, the Japan can promote their culture even on an international level. And your only response is, minority cannot actually promote minority culture. That's not necessarily true. Even in current situation, a lot of government actually try to help minority culture to preserving the true essence of those cultures at the end of the day. They want to make sure those cultures are preserved, to make sure celebration like Cinco de Mayo will not be treated as just another holiday. To make sure that the day of the dead won't be seen as somehow you want to distribute candy and wear costume of other people, of other characters or other people at the end of the day. They want to make sure that people will know why those situation comes up, why or how those together, because those are also history and how you want to appreciate your own culture, your own country, and how you develop the even in like sense over a certain country a national identity in the first place. So it doesn't necessarily mean an exclusive factor. But the point of we want to make sure that it is somehow seen as special is because we don't want other people to punish the value of your culture and to change the narrative, which is especially like what is happening under your status quo. To be a sense that you want to make sure that somehow your culture is being devalue your culture. You want culture, you want to sell out your culture, and what happens at the end of the day? We told you from the lead opposition speech that most likely they're not. Most of the time, these are the only thing that stand to depend on and as part of their own identity. Or once you make sure that you are all making fun of those identities, you do not actually appreciate what is happening for this film. We are very beneficial, and you're right. No? We don't see how what to make sure monetize can actually help these people. Let's do a comparative of what happens under their side. Sure, people how we see normal or accepted when we can wear hijab. But we don't see that as any discrimination when people do not actually understand Islam, when we don't understand their culture, when we can still discriminate or take action against these people at the end of the day. Under our side, sure, in our worst case scenario, certain people will may face certain form of discrimination based on whatever policy of that particular country. But they can feel satisfied with their own culture because it's not in a direct attack towards their own identity, towards what they believe in, and towards their own lifestyle. Under your side, you may not face indirect discrimination towards these people, but they cannot live a proper life when their own identity and their own lifestyle keeps on being questioned, keeps on being downplayed, keeps on being treated as a joke. And we don't see that as any beneficial lifestyle on your side. At least on the outside, you can be proud, you can feel safe in the private sphere, in the safe space, and among your own families, and you don't see it as a cloud in the cloud.
Alright, the
I think this page want to do the idea of objectivity as well as understand how exactly to say that culture should be represented by the exact people who believe that is that another person. And that's why it's very important for us to realize that the way in which we rationalize the debate shouldn't have greater control and therefore should be on top of that. Assume that we can be allies and be helpful to them, realize and don't create discussions of whether or not what we're necessarily doing will be harm at the end of the day. That's what I have two issues I have messaged about. Firstly, is there a benefit in the world in which we do not shame appropriation at all, directly talking about their model? Secondly, why is it important to have less people appropriating culture and why is it far better work on the outside of the house? Let's talk about the first thing. Is there really a benefit without shaming appropriation directly in what happens in the near side, right? Because what the model seeks to achieve happens in two ways. Firstly, that in all circumstances, if a particular item of it does better with our help, it is a benefit that we take, and we think that this benefit overpowers the ability for you to have control over your own culture. But secondly, that somehow we are able to wear these items and celebrate it in a positive manner, but we do not believe that we can change it at all. which really doesn't seem to be the case in status quo, right? Because circa 2000, where a lot of people were not aware what exactly cultural appropriation was, or worse, you have people like the Washington Redskins, for example, who didn't realize that these particular narratives were the majority speaking on behalf of the minority, and suddenly and subtly or subliminally making it revolve around how the majority wants that particular narrative or that culture to then be seen behind this, and why this is particularly a hard. Two things. Firstly, we told you the light discussion that you want that be outside the house of whether or not appropriation is good or not is something that happens better on our side. We tell you that at least we check ourselves to ensure majorities do not assume that we can do it with the minorities' behalf. But why exactly is this also important? Because in a world in which we believe that we can always speak on behalf of other people, that's also problematic because we don't allow them to voice out for themselves, especially in knowledge that majorities are likely to drown out the narratives that minorities want to push out there. So you're likely to say that your culture doesn't matter much if it can speak on behalf of you and become the person who is the microphone, for example, and do it on their behalf. But secondly, we've also said that celebrating completely denies the ability for minorities to speak up against cases of appropriation, which they believe shouldn't be something that white people, for example, do on behalf of Asian Americans in this particular circumstance. So you need to tell us, for example, with your speech, which I hope you did, and tell us why exactly it is okay for you to deny the ability for them to speak up against this. Secondly, why is it important for us to have less people appropriating culture? Because a large part of their case was to say society should set standards as to, I'm sorry, the large part of our case was to say why society should set standards as to what exactly is beneficial or not. But here's where the discussion inside the house on two ways. The first thing we when it comes to ourselves, whether or not we're possibly doing changes on behalf of them instead of giving them the ability to stick to your own culture and say, I'm the one that's leading the discussion. And we also err the side of the question, err the side of the of caution and say the people should then be Native Americans when it comes to talking on behalf of these issues. So what else does this enable, right? That firstly, we empowerment to at least allow individuals to understand that they have the great eyes or to a culture that has the biggest proximity to them. The second control stays within this particular culture, saying itself to be represented this way. If you think this in a different way, it means you're appropriating the culture on their behalf, and that makes you believe that it is legitimate for you.
All right, to end Rama, we have the computer. AC Central Energy.
I'm not sure in mind that the issues that were brought up from side opposition, number one, regarding how these people lack respect. We conceded that and we said the bigger issue is the best because it's like oppression. Let me tell you how under our side, at the end of the day, we are the ones, I know it's happening, that we can actually solve the issue. Okay, firstly, let's talk about the amount of how majority is the one that are creating these oppressions, and villainizing them is not going to help. We've told you we've told you so many times that we will allow these people to use this culture, be it as a trend, be it to sell, if in this circumstance you can create a norm. Why? Because when it's a norm, you won't go and say, hey, you little weirdo wearing a bindi, you are weird, I'm going to oppress you right now. Because it becomes a norm, because it becomes hypocritical if someone uses it as a trend and if someone else is practicing it, it becomes like some sort of weird thing. So yeah, the issue of that. Secondly, I will have to remind you of the model that they bring, in which they believe that condemnation can bring to all these beautiful things they talked about, which was how they can prevent all these things. We told you from Buddha how condemnation, as this motion says, acts as a trend. and how it in and of itself becomes the major discourse that happens, in which these condemnation and this like I do it becomes the main discourse, and the discourse the culture becomes drowned. And we told you that even if this kind of bad discourse happens, why it's more important. I'll remind you about our argument regarding exclusivity and why it's actually really helpful towards these people. On the outside, we believe that if we don't condemn them and let them do whatever they want with the culture, we allow this culture to be open to more people. This helps in regards to making this kind of like a norm. Although they might not understand the reason, we'll tell you that it not being such an exclusive thing allows practices of this culture to not be condemned. Under their side, they say that, oh, you'll get discriminated anyways. But their example was of a black community trying to represent a black community, right? So we tell you that at the end of the day, what we want is to allow the majority to practice these things, and it becomes a norm in majority for them to understand the situation. Under their side, they think that we can't create understanding. But under their side, when you condemn, is when you actually push them aside, and when understanding is not likely to happen. You're not guaranteed that they're going to respect it, because they might wear kimono, get judged, and be like, oh, I'm not wearing kimono. And that's about it. On the outside, we can ensure that this process will happen. So under whose model are we helping the minorities? On the outside, where we ensure that the people causing harm towards these minorities are tackled firsthand in comparison to under their side with all these super cool sounding arguments that might not be like regard the initial issue, which is the oppression faced day in, day out by these minorities. Thank you.
Alright, thank you very much. Please cross forward, shake hands, wait outside. Sorry, but I need to remind you that. Let me know what I'm supposed to do.